Hi, yes, Evans. Today we're going to look at two poems that include the theme of magic in them. So to begin with, what I'd like you to do is have a read through this little extract from one of the poems and tell me what you think the father really thinks about the boy's magic. I've also included in these slides a little cartoon strip called Calvin and Hobbes, as he had as a character, Calvin, who is the boy here, and Hobbes being his pet tiger, or rather a toy tiger that kind of comes to life. But anyway, he's fascinated with magic, and I thought it'd be quite a nice way to introduce this amazing comic strip that went for 10 years, from 1985 to 1995, into your lives as well. So our starter is, what do you think the father really thinks about the boy's magic? When you've had a chance to finish that and read the cartoon, you can move on. Right, now, what I hope you thought about was not only the words that were written, but the tone in which it might have been said, because poetry is meant to be said out loud. So the father might not have come across as being disinterested in the words, but he certainly would have come across that way in the way it's delivered. So if he smiled and just said, "Very nice," that's quite dismissive, isn't it? Maybe rude even. So we'd like you to read now the first poem, which is where that extract comes from, and it's called Learning Magic by Barnard. So you'll see it on the screen here, and I will attach it to your lesson as well. But have read through the poem, and I want you to try and already start thinking about what the message might be. Once you've read through it, come back and I'll tell you what you're going to do next. Okay, so there are 3 questions I want you to answer based on this particular poem. So can you find any words that are related to the idea of magic or the theme of magic? So for question 1, list any words that are linked with the theme of magic. Number 2, why does the father seem unsupportive? So what is it about the father that we can see in terms of his reactions to the boy's magic that seems to be less than supportive of his son's abilities? Lastly, why do you think the father reacts differently at the end to how he did after each of the previous tricks? So obviously there's a number of tricks the son plays on the father, and he only really reacts in a more stunned and surprised way right at the end. So why might that be? So have a go answering those questions, and then come back and we'll have a look at our second poem together. Okay, so our next poem is called Magic by Josh Seigal, and it's a very different poem in the sense that perhaps it doesn't have a narrative, doesn't tell a story. It puts across a very interesting message by the poet. So what I want you to do first is we're going to shift our attention away from words and now into techniques. So there are 3 techniques we're looking for in this poem: alliteration, where you see a series of words beginning with the same letter; repetition, which you should know what that means; and examples of rhyme as well. So one thing that is perhaps not evident in prose, but certainly more so in poetry. So have a look through those three techniques once you've read through the poem, and come back and we'll see what we're doing next. Okay, so you've hopefully had a little chance to look through and find some examples, especially how the ending of each stanza ends with the word magic, and how that changes only in a very slight way near the end. So that idea of repetition is clearly there. The alliteration throughout maybe gives us more of an impression of which of the particular things that Seigal believes are most magical are emphasised with that technique. But also we then see the idea of the repetition at the end of each stanza as well. So that is a sense of repetition there. But the rhyme as well that comes throughout doesn't really appear in the first poem. So there's a very different feel to it. It feels much more vocal, much more sung than it would if it was just read. Now, I've given you 2 extracts here that are just from the very end of both of those poems. And we start now having to think about the message that the poet wants to give us as a reader. And normally the title and the ending are good places to look to understand a writer's message. So have a look and try and answer these questions. So what is different about how they've been written? Just looking at these extracts, the top one from the first poem says, from the second poem says, just have a look round where you dwell, the sea, the sky, the land as well. You don't need wands or magic spells for magic. And the first poem ended, "But I can do this," the boy said, cutting off his arm, and then reattaching it, and the father said nothing. He was too busy holding his breath. So look at how there are several differences about how they've been written. I'd like you to explain what those are. For question 2, when you're ready, is what's your impression of the boy in the poem Learning Magic? So in that poem, what impression do you get of the boy? And question 3, what do you think Seigal believes magic is according to his poem? So 3 questions there for you to answer, and don't take too long with those, only looking for a sentence or two to explain your answer clearly. And at the end, our final task is I'd like you to write a very brief comparison between the 2 poems' message. So with regard to Barnard's poem, Learning Magic, there are 2 questions that will help you develop your opinion a bit more about understanding the message. So what does Barnard believe magic does to people? Look at how the magic that the son gives or presents affects the father, but also think what that magic has done for the child. How could that link to why each of the stanzas are only 2 lines long? So each stanza are in little 2-line pairs. Then these aren't couplets because they don't rhyme, but they are just stanzas of 2 lines. And then focusing on Seigal's poem, what do you think he believes is magical? What is it? Don't just list everything in the poem. Be more holistic. Look at the poem as a whole. What does he believe is magical? And how far would you agree with that? Now, if you would answer all those 4 questions, that makes it a lot easier for you to then start making a comparison between how magic has been presented in one, or the message of the effect, the message of the effect of magic has been presented in one versus the other. So with those 4 smaller questions answered, it allows us to start bringing things together to create one big, more general answer that will help you create that comparison. So obviously we're looking at differences like we did in how the extracts here are slightly different, but also we're looking at similarities. Is there anything that you could identify that's the same? So that is your final task for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I've also enjoyed learning a little bit about Calvin and Hobbes. And feel free to look it up and print out your favourite ones and show them to me when we're back in school, which hopefully won't be too long. So thanks for today, and see you soon.